Assalamu alaikum, dear third year students. As I promised you that I would do a audio or video clip on acculturation model, as I could not finish it in your class, so here it goes. Acculturation model is an important second language acquisition model, and it was designed and proposed by Schumann in 1978. This model indeed focuses two factors, social and psychological. So the model is based on the social psychology of acculturation. Acculturation model maintains that certain social and psychological variables combine into a single variable, which he terms as acculturation. Acculturation means the process by which a human being acquires the culture of a particular society from infancy. It assumes that learners will acquire the target language to the degree they acculturate or they can acculturate to the target language group. There are two groups of variables that this model proposes: social factors and affective factors. Social factors are the social dimensions, and affective factors are of psychological dimension. And these two factors, social factors and affective factors or psychological factors, batch into a single variable that is called acculturation. And acculturation is a major causal variable in SLA, second language acquisition. It is defined as social and psychological integration of the learner with the target language group or community. Social and psychological distance between the second language learner and the target language community is a major factor in determining the degree to which the language learners will acquire the second language. The learners acquire the second language only to the degree that they can acculturate. There are two types of acculturation. Learners are socially integrated with the target language group and develop sufficient contacts with target language speakers to enable them to acquire the target language. The second type is learners consciously or unconsciously desire to adopt the lifestyle and cultural and other values of the target language group. Both types of acculturation are important to provoke acquisition of the target language. Social and psychological contact with the target language group is the essential element in acculturation. Adopting the values and lifestyle of the target language group is not always necessary, but it can help to successfully acquire the second language. Acculturation factors. I have already told you that there are two types of acculturation factors. Social factors. Social factors include social dominance or non-dominance, subordination, assimilation, acculturation, preservation, cohesiveness, attitude, intended length of the residence of target language area. And the affective factors or psychological variables include language shock, culture shock, motivation, and ego permeability. And we will talk about each of them in brief. Social variables. Two social groups with different languages are in contact situation. One group considered as a second language learning group, and the other is a target language group. Social dominance pattern, the first variable of social aspect or social dimension. Social dominance pattern explains how political, cultural, technological, and economical differences are there between the second language group and the target language group, and which influence language acquisition process. If the second language group is politically, culturally, technically, and economically superior to the target language group, it will tend not to learn the target language. So if you are politically, culturally, technically, and economically superior to the language group which you want to learn, of course you do not feel that much motivated, that much interested in learning the target language. French colonists in Tunisia were potential learner of Arabic, but as a group, the French are politically, culturally, technically, and economically much more dominant and superior to the Tunisian, and felt little need to acquire Arabic. If the second language learning group is subordinate and inferior to the target language group, there will also be social distance between the two groups. And the second language learners will resist learning the target language. For example, American Indians living in the Southwest have traditionally been subordinate to the dominant Anglo group, I mean English group or English speaking group, and have resisted acquiring English language. If the second language learning group and the target language group both have equal political, social, economical, cultural and technical status, the acquisition of the target language by the second language group will be enhanced. So there should not be too much dominance, whether superior or inferior, between the target language group and the second language learning group. If the distance is high, there will be little acquisition, and if there is similarity, if there is congruence and not much difference, not much dominance pattern lies there, then the acquisition of the target language will be enhanced. So contact between the two groups likely to be more widespread. So in that situation, if there is congruence, if there are similarities, two groups will have more contact and they will be open to each other, and so language acquisition becomes easier for the second language learning group. The second factor which affect target language learning involves three integration strategies. They are assimilation, preservation, and adaptation. Assimilation means when the second language learning group gives off its own values and lifestyle and adopts the values, lifestyle, and views of the target language group. So as a result, it maximizes contact between the two groups and promotes acquisition of the target language group. That the second language learning group assimilates with the target language group. The second factor of social integration is, or strategy, the second strategy of social integration is preservation. The second language learning group maintains its own lifestyles, values, and refuses to adapt or assimilate the target language group values and lifestyle. And as a result, it creates social or ideological distance between the two groups, and it becomes impossible or improbable that the second language learning group will acquire target language. So if the second language learning group wants to preserve their own lifestyle, values, and as a result they refuse to adapt or assimilate with the target language group, target language values and lifestyle, it becomes difficult for them to understand, to have widespread connection, contacts with the target language group, and as a result it hampers their target language acquisition. The third strategy of social integration is adaptation. The second language group adopts the lifestyle and values of the target language group, but maintains its own values and lifestyle. Okay, so in this case, second language learning group adopts the lifestyle of and values of the target language group, but are very aware of maintaining their own values and lifestyle. The third social factor is enclosure. Enclosure refers to the degree to which the second language group and the target language group share the same social constructs such as schools, churches, clubs, recreational facilities, profession and trades. That is infrastructural similarities. If the two groups share these constructs or infrastructural aspects, the enclosure is said to be low and contact between the two groups is improved. Acquisition of second language by the second language learning group is facilitated if the two groups have different social construct. Then enclosure is high, contact between the two groups is limited, and opportunities for acquisition of the L2 are reduced. Next social factor is cohesiveness and size. If the second language learning group is cohesive, it will tend to remain separate from the target language group. If the second language group is large, the intergroup contact will be more frequent than intergroup contact. Both these situations will reduce opportunities for second language acquisition. Congruence is the fifth factor. If the two cultures are similar, social contact between the two groups are more likely to happen spontaneously, and thus second language learning becomes easier. Next factor is attitude. If the second language learning group and the target language group have positive attitudes towards each other, second language learning is more easily facilitated. Length of residence in the target language area is the next factor. If the second language learning group intends to remain for a long time in the target language area, it is likely to develop more widespread contacts with the target language group. Therefore, an intended lengthy residence in the target language area supposed to promote second language learning. Okay, now we'll talk about affective factors, the second factor, or you can say psychological variables. The psychological variables which influence acculturation and SLA, second language acquisition, include language shock, culture shock, motivation, and ego permeability. So we'll talk about these four psychological variables, or which are called affective factors too. A learner may learn second language within such social conditions which are not favorable for second language acquisition. On the other hand, he or she may not learn under favorable social condition. So, learning the second language may cause some language shock. Language shock refers to the situation when learners attempt to speak a second language. They often fear that they will appear comic, that the people will make fun of them when they try to speak the language, because they will be making mistakes. Adult learners fear ridicule and criticism, so they apprehend, or they are very afraid of the ridicules and the criticism that might harm their second language acquisition, etc. A child does not have fear for criticism. Child sees language as a method of play and finds communication as a source of pleasure. That is why language shock happens frequently with adult learners, and as adult learners are very conscious of his or her own language, her values, etc. So that is why it is easier for the children to learn a second language. If an adult individual preserves these infantile characteristics, he or she can easily acquire a new language. Adult second language learners are often haunted by doubts as to whether their words actually reflect their ideas, but children are less worried about this. Second psychological variable is culture shock. Culture shock can be defined as anxiety resulting from the confusion a learner encounters while entering a new culture. When moving into a new culture, the learner finds himself or herself in a dependent state. His or her problem-solving mechanisms often do not work. His or her routine activities of his native country require a great deal of energy in the new environment. This situation can cause fear, anxiety, disorientation, and stress. It can develop a powerful syndrome of rejection. He or she may reject his or her own culture, his organization, and the people of the host country. As a result, it makes less effort to learn the second language. So if you are residing in a second language, target language community, you may feel or you may fear that your culture is different from the second language culture, and you feel apprehended, you feel haunted, and you do not like the new environment. As a result, it hampers your second language acquisition. Next factor is psychological factor is motivation. Motivation involves the learner's reason for acquiring the target language. There are two types of motivation: integrative motivation and instrumental motivation. Integrative motivation refers to the situation when learner wants to learn the second language because he values and admires the target language that he or she wants to be one with the target language. The learner wants to talk, behave, and maintain lifestyle like the target language group. He wants to, the target second language learners want to integrate with the target language group. And the second type of motivation is called instrumental motivation. An instrumental oriented learner shows less interest in the people and lifestyle of the target language group, but wants to learn the language for some utilitarian reason, for some, say, useful reason, like getting a good job, gaining recognition in his or her community. For example, in Bangladesh, most of the students learn English for getting good marks. So these are getting good jobs, getting better salary. So that these are instrumental motivation. Learners' instrumental goals needed low level of proficiency in second language and be able to there. So for example, you want to be able to buy food or take public transport, so you need very little proficiency of your second language. It has generally been thought that integrative motivation is more effective than instrumental motivation. So a number of studies have found that in Bangladesh, students have instrumental motivation more than integrative motivation, and that may be a cause for their uh, poor acquisition quality. And the last factor, psychological factor or variable, is ego permeability. Learners' native-like ability in second language develops language ego. Language ego is parallel to the Freudian construct, body ego. In the course of general ego development, the child acquires body ego, by which he becomes aware of the limits of his physical entity and adapts himself according to the environment around him. In similar fashion, the child acquires a sense of the boundaries of his language. The sounds, words, syntax, and morphology of his language becomes objectified and develops strong boundaries. In the early stage of development, language ego boundaries are permeable, but later they become fixed and rigid. So it becomes indeed very difficult for an adult to learn a second language because he or she has already developed his or her first language, and her second language acquisition becomes highly influenced by grammatical, syntactic, semantic, and all other linguistic aspects of the background or first language. And in childhood, the permeability of the ego is very low, is very high, and that is why a child can learn the second language very easily, but it becomes difficult with the progress of time or with the age of the learners. So that is all about. Okay, let me give you some criticism of acculturation model. According to Freeman, Schumann did not specify the combinations and the levels of social and psychological factors to predict learners' language outcome. Acculturation model also does not explain how social and psychological factors affect the rate of acquisition. This model does not give a statement for the change of the social and psychological distance over time. It also does not explain learners' current social and psychological distance and how it correlates to the learner's proficiency while learning a second language. It does not show how social and psychological factors vary from individual to individual. That is why later on a number of changes or modifications have been suggested and done to the acculturation model, and two dimensions have been added by Anderson. These are nativization and denativization, and we can talk about these things in a classroom. Thank you very much for watching, and if you hope that you can have a good idea from this audio lesson. Assalamu alaikum.